here we are to continue our discussion of CSS and animation with CSS. In the last example, we looked at making a 3D kind of spinning card or something. The extension to that would be to make it spin on a hover, right? So I've got that set up here. You can see I hover over this and it spins. I have this outer box here, and I'll talk about that. This example kind of needs a container to really work well. So, and you could make this a little smaller. I didn't set the size on it, so it kind of expands, but we could make it fit the exact shape of the square if we wanted. But anyway, so we have this one. If I hover over it, I see the back side. If I move off, I see the front. Okay, and you could put anything in here. You could put all sorts of content, right? So let's kind of build this one from scratch, right? So I'm gonna get rid of everything here, and I added this extra. This follows the same example as the last one, where it's got a box with a front and a back element inside. And then I added this extra div on the outside. I'm actually going to remove that now, and then I'll talk about like why we need that extra container in a second. So let's set our thing up again. We'll set it up as width of 100 pixels, height of 100 pixels, background color of tomato. I don't know why I keep using that color this time. And let's give it margin of 2 rem and position of relative, right? And then we have our box, right? So that looks pretty good. Let's give it transform style is preserve 3D. So we'll need that, right? And then we also need the WebKit version transform style preserve 3D. I don't know why this one doesn't show me that on the code hints, but I'll just copy it from above. I think it should look like that. Okay, so we got that. So now let's set up the inner elements, right? So we'll say, box, child div is going to be, width of 80 pixels, height of 80 pixels. And again, this could be anything, right? You could have multiple elements in there and arrange them in any way. But just for the example here, we'll do it this way. So we'll do border radius of 50%, right? And then we'll give it a background color of, I was using wheat. Let's use that, right? And I think what we did last time is we did, text, align, center, and line height of 80 pixels to match the height of the box, right? So that looks pretty good. So now let's move our circles to the center, right? So we'll give it position absolute and set the left to 10 and the top to 10. Okay, so now the two circles are one on top of the other, and that's looking pretty good, right? Okay, so first let's get the flip, and then we'll do a little bit of work to position the backside so we see it. But let's just get the flip working and talk about that. So what we're going to do, instead of doing a keyframe animation, we're going to do a transition. So I'll apply the transition here, transition, right? And we'll say 400 milliseconds, okay? And now I want to set up a hover effect that applies to the box, right? And this is actually not going to work, so this is where we're going to need the container, and I'll try and show you why. So we'll say, box, colon, hover, and here we'll say transform, and we'll need perspective. I was using 400 pixels. I thought that looked pretty good. And then we'll say rotate on the Y 180 degrees. Now, if we're degrees. There we go, right? And if we're thinking about in terms of keyframes, right? Even though I'm not using at keyframe, but I'm thinking like the extremes of motion, like where am I moving to? So basically I'm rotating from 0 degrees to 180 degrees. So what I should do when I'm using transition is I should set the starting value, right, on the object initially, and then on the hover, I should have my other extreme of the value, right? So if this one extreme is, rotate 180 degrees, then over here on the box, the other extreme should be rotate 0, okay? So actually, maybe I can move this up here and we can see it next to the box. So there we go, I got box, it's all set up, I got my transform, and now I have my hover, okay? So on the hover, we'll rotate to 180 degrees. When we're not hovered, we'll rotate to 0 degrees. And that will always happen in 400 milliseconds. So let's give that a try. So yeah, so I see the flip happening, but when I flip over it, do you see how it kind of like it bounces a little bit? So you can imagine like if I get near the edge, it starts rotating and then it moves in such a way as it's not underneath the cursor anymore, right? So this edge moves a little bit, as it's flipping, this edge moves towards the center, right? And then it's not under the cursor anymore, right? Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's a little like iffy, right? So what we really need here, because it'll move out from underneath the cursor, right, and that ruins our hover, right, is we need a container that will take up the area of the box here and doesn't flip. So we just need like an area that's a rectangle, and what'll happen is we'll hover over the rectangle and make the inner box flip, okay? So let's set that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another div here, and then I'll take these 3 divs here and put them inside this inner one, right? Okay. And then we'll give the outer one a class name. Let's call it like box container, okay? And this could be any name too. And what we want to do here is we want to say box container child box, except we'll move the hover from the box to the container. So what we're saying here is we're saying, hey, when you're hovering over the container, then apply these transformations to the box. So we're looking for a hover state on box container, but these things apply to the box that's a child of the box container, right? So let's give this a try and see how it works. And I think what I'll do just to make sure we can see the box container is I'll give it a style. So I'll say, box container, you're going to be border of 1 pixel solid. So that should just give us a 1 pixel black border, right? Oh, there we go. So now if I hover over the box here, you can see there's no weird jittery motion. I hover over this thing, I'm over it, I can come off. The box has 2 rems of margin, and by default the div is it expands to fill the container there. So you might want to change the size of this, right? So we could set it to width of 100 pixels, height of 100 pixels, right? And then maybe on this guy we could just take the margin off here and put it on this one, right? And then now I can see the black border just around the edge of the red box, and now you can see when I hover over it, I'm not getting any of that weird jittering motion. Okay, so now it's just going back and setting the back side so we see it on the back, right? So we can add a couple of those styles in here too. You could try that on your own, right? So because we did that in the last example, right? But I'll add that in here. So I've got the div here, and what I want to do is for both divs, I'm going to say, back face visibility is hidden, right? And then what I'll do, and actually, well, let me do this because I also ran into a weird little issue with this too, and you'll see it in a moment, right? And we'll solve that problem too. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the box div and get the last child. So this should be the back, right? The back element. And you know, we got, this is both front and back, and then this is both front and back, and then last child kind of filters that out to just the back element, or the last div that we have here, right? Because the two children are these guys, and then the last one is here, right? So so we've got that. So now let's do this. Let's say transform rotate on the Y, and we'll rotate 180 degrees. So this rotation is just applied inside on the inner element, right? It's not animated, so it'll just be flipped over, and when the whole thing flips, we'll see it, right? So let's try this, and you'll see I had a little issue with this, right? So I see the front now, and I hover, and then you see it kind of, I see back, and then it flips, right? And what I think is happening there is, and actually the back-faced visibility is not working too. Let me fix that, right? Because I forgot we're on Safari, so I need to say, you know, WebKit back-face visibility is hidden, right? Okay, so this is the problem I had before, right? So this is the setup that we have, and you'll notice I see the back, but when it gets done flipping, it disappears. And I think there's some weird issue with the 3D where the back and the front and the parent element, that's the red box, right, are all on the same plane. And the computer is like, well, you know what, if I draw them all on the same plane, I can only draw one of them, right? Imagine like they're not layers of paper, they're on the same page. They're like, you know, one isn't above or in front of the other one. And so then the computer's kind of making a rendering error. And so when I saw that, I fixed it by doing this. I put translate on the Z on the last child, and then I moved it -1 pixel on the Z. So that just pushed it out from the surface so it was in front of the red surface. And remember, it's on the back side, so -1 Z, kind of like if we're looking at it here, the back one's like behind the front one, so -1 goes into the screen. And so when it flips over, it's like about a pixel in front of the red area, right? So let's try this. I think this worked for me earlier, right? So I'll refresh. Oh yeah, there we go, right? So anyway, so hopefully that's useful to you, you know, and you could maybe do something creative with that. And thanks for watching.